Hello, everybody, and welcome to our latest video. It is our Southern California housing market update. My name is Stephen Mead with Domicile real estate for people who love houses. Anyhow, this week, once again, we are talking about our Southern California market statistics. And for us, that does mean LA and Orange counties. And I actually put in here that we're going to make some predictions this week, sort of based on how the year is starting. I know a couple times I've talked about looking at how these first few weeks sort of work out on the data to kind of get an idea of what kind of market it looks like we are going to have. I think some of you may be delighted to hear this. Others of you may be a little disappointed to hear it. But here we go. Without further ado, let's go ahead and we're going to jump in to our market stats. Let me pull those up here really quick. Okay, so starting off with our total active listings, right? Like this is a good measurement of the market, right? Like of how many listings do we have just available and out there. And I think what I'm going to tell you about this graph and why it's what this graph doesn't have on it that really kind of screams loud and clear. So typically, as we head towards the end of the year, we see inventory numbers take a dive like this, especially through that month of December. And then as soon as we hit into January, they kind of take this sort of bounce and sort of like a little bit of a hockey stick effect. And you know, we've seen a little bit of that when we look at our first time home buyer stats. But if we're looking here in our under 1 million, since the beginning of the year, these haven't really risen that much. And in fact, in our $1 to $2 million category, inventory is pretty flat with only a slight rise. I mean, we're just not. And then I think the part that really sort of speaks volumes to me is that we got this little bit of an increase and then it's just completely fizzled out in our under $1 million market. Like inventory is not really going up in the last week. It's pretty much staying about where it has. We're not seeing those increases. So, you know, kind of prediction number one is that I think 2021 inventory wise is going to look a lot like 2020. There's really going to feel like there's a shortage of houses. And I think the only thing that could make that dynamic change is if we see some drastic interest rate changes or sort of these other effects in our market, because we're just not seeing an organic level of new listings that's resulting in increased inventory. So that's prediction number one. Now, if we look at our last 14 days of new listings, we actually see that in terms of new things hitting the market, we have seen a little bit of that hockey stick like shape, right? Under 1 million, we see it drops, it bottoms out around the new year, and boom, now we are seeing more new listings hitting the market. We're seeing a similar effect in our $1 to $2 million price range, though a little bit gentler of a slope. Now, you're probably thinking to yourself, how is it possible that our new listings are going up and yet our total available active inventory is not going up? Well, if we take a look here at our new escrows, this is in fact the problem. And the problem is, unlike in a normal year, which is sort of led in the spring, we lead with listings, right? Like we sort of see in that January mark, the sellers are ready to go and the buyers are still kind of coming back. This year, those two elements are really together. We saw this drop and boom, now new escrows are jumping in both of our under 1 million and our $1 to $2 million sort of categories. Again, this is in LA and Orange County counties. This is also for sort of a whole market index of all property types. We don't divide between condos, single families. This really is meant to kind of take all of it together, but we do divide it into two price ranges. So, you know, the net thing is here is if we go back, guess what? Supply is up. Unfortunately, so is demand. And that's resulting in sort of that inventory that's kind of a very sticky number. It's just not seeming to rise the same way we would have expected. Now, if we look at our absorption rate, you know, we see that things sort of crested towards the end of the year, right? Like buyers just kept going. There were no new listings and they just ate up that inventory. And now what's happening is that absorption rate dropped down, but look what's happened. Now that absorption rate is pretty flat. And in fact, it's actually rising a little bit, which means we are heading back to that super competitive market. Our under $1 million is already, that has bounced back to over, I think it's right around 80% right now. That is very much a seller's market. We are in the beginning to middle of January, and we are very much in a seller's market. I think it's important to sort of take note at how the rest of the year is going to go. Even our $1 to $2 million range, again, absorption rate dropped and then it bounced and it is heading back upward. We're not seeing that inventory get rebuilt. And we if that were happening, we'd actually begin to see kind of lower absorption rates. We wouldn't be in that sort of clear seller's market territory if inventory was getting built back up. Now, this is something that we've started. We divide the market into 3 segments for closed prices. And we've got our 75th percentile. This is our luxury market. We have our median market, right? That's kind of our meat and potatoes end of the market. And then we've got our 25th percentile, which is our entry level market space. And as you can see, remember, these are deals that were negotiated a year ago. If we take a look at this, or not a year ago, a month ago, rather, excuse me, if we take a look at this, we saw those 75th percentile, that was a little bit more volatile. Those closed prices took a little bit of a dip, and then boy, they started heading back upward. Here for our median, a smaller dip, then they started heading back upward. Now, these aren't huge price changes. Again, this is kind of just to show the general shape of the market. But even in our 25th percentile, a little bit of a softening, and then we are starting to rise back up. I fully expect to see that there's going to be a little bit of a spring bounce. I think unless we've got some external variables that affect things, if you combine that with sort of vaccinations happening on COVID, these numbers that we're seeing right now, I think they will get better. We will see things reopen. I think all these things will contribute to prices climbing in sort of this 90-day period. Now, this is a new chart that we're doing for 2021. And again, I just want to talk about what this is. So this is a measurement. It's called percent still active for 14 days. So this is what we do. We look at all of the homes that were input into the MLS in the last 2 weeks. And then we say, how many of those houses are still available and active today? How many are either an active or a coming soon status, meaning they are not under contract and they haven't been pulled from the market? And if we go back here and we take a look, the thing that I think I mentioned last time we looked at this is that, what's really important here is not the absolute number, it's the direction things are heading. And if you look here, I think the direction things are heading is pretty clear, right? We kind of went into the new year at a certain level, and now in both categories, under 1 million and 1 to 2 million, these numbers are diving. That means there are fewer and fewer homes available that went on the market in the last 2 weeks. And I think when you look at that, I think that's really kind of the most important sign of this market, is that what this tells me is this market is tightening. It is not getting easier, it is getting more difficult. And to sort of see these results happening in January, that's early, that's a bit unusual. And I really think that's setting the tone for the next 90 days or so. I expect things to get worse, not better. If you are a buyer, if you are a seller, great news. The bull market continues for homes. Now, if you're a seller who's selling and buying, that kind of cuts both ways, right? It's a huge benefit selling your house, but it means that that search is going to be that much tougher. And we're seeing this in both price categories. So even if you were an under $1 million seller, and now you're turning into a $1 million to $2 million buyer, you're still facing these same market pressures. Here we have our list close ratio, right? And remember, this is based on data that is a month old. But if we look here, yep, things took a dip, and then boom, especially in our under 1 million, boy, that market started getting very aggressive again. And I think that really is sort of just kind of a sign of the times. Things are a bit steadier, maybe even slightly declining in our 1 to 2 million. So we're definitely going to want to watch that. Our other big indicator of sort of market health, right, is to watch our days on market. And if we're looking at this towards from the latter part of the year, right, in late December, for our 1 to 2 million, that number declined. It took a bounce, and then boom, it is dropping again. And remember, this is days on market for new contracts. So this is looking at our days on market average for the homes that went into escrow in the last 7 days. So if we're looking at these stats, this is very up-to-date information about what is happening with the market. And days on market has taken a dive in both of our price categories. Another sign that it is a tightening market, not a loosening market, and that pretty much all this new inventory you're seeing, buyers are just snapping it up. Finally, we have our affordability graph here, right? And part of this jump here is because of the way we show this, the way that we've done our dates. We have July of 2018. We have the beginning of 2019, the middle of 2019, the beginning of 2020, middle of 2020, and then sort of here where we are. And guess what? We are seeing that these numbers are rising. We are getting closer and closer to those 2018 payment levels. And I think as the economy improves, as we see vaccinations happen, I think we're going to see this number jump over 100%. I do think that our market has room for that. And the reason why our market has room for that is, remember, these numbers were the middle of 2018. If we add back in inflation, that would mean just to have sort of the same adjusted for inflation number, we would actually be looking at a number that's around 109%. This graph is not indexed to inflation. So kind of bear that in mind. Anyhow, that's really my prediction for this year. Inventory is tight, and I think we are going to see a spring bump in prices. Obviously, any interest rate movements could affect that, but I still think our market has a little bit of room to grow price-wise. It'll still remain a very compelling proposition of home buying. It still means we'll be paying at or less than the inflation-adjusted payment level for 2018. So still a very good time to buy, but definitely notice the market is tightening. And I do expect prices to also kind of resume that upward movement. And as is typical in our market, there tends to be a month where things kind of really take a bit of a jump in the spring. I don't see that yet. This is kind of slow and steady increases, but I do think we're going to see one of those months coming up. So without further ado, I think we're kind of done here for this week. Once again, just want to remind you, we do have our first time home buyer guide. There's going to be a link in the description if you're watching this on either our Facebook business page or on YouTube. Do not forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. And then also keep an eye out. We will be dropping another episode of our podcast relatively soon. I'm super excited for the guests that we have. So definitely keep an eye out for that. We will see you soon. And as always, questions, comments, we love them. Don't be afraid to post them or send them our way. And we'd love to chat with you soon.